Just give me a few moments. We're going to be joining together and taking communion. I want you to focus for a moment on the purpose of this table. Some of the songs we were singing there, as Tyler made reference to them, the songs that remind us of the fact that Jesus Christ has defeated death and that he is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And there's no one can rival him. There's no one can rival our God. So the purpose of this table is not to focus on the past. It's not to focus even on death. While you remember the death of Jesus, we remember what happened. But the purpose of this table is that we focus on life. Jesus might well have said, and he did, when he took the bread and he broke it in his hands, and he said, "This is my body that's broken for you." The disciples didn't understand what he was implying at that moment in time, but he knew that within a matter of hours, his body would be broken. And they would understand then. And then he took the cup and he said, "This cup is the new covenant, the New Testament." The old covenant, the Old Testament was based on the law of Moses, was based on the Old Testament laws that God introduced. Nothing wrong with them, and still applied today, many of them. But Jesus took that cup and he said, "This cup is a new covenant in my blood." The old covenant is now moving on to the new covenant. The old covenant was based on the blood of animals. He says, "This is the new covenant in my blood." Again, they didn't fully understand that, but they would within a matter of hours. But Jesus also spoke of his coming kingdom. And that's why Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 11 that we should do this until Christ returns. See, this table is not just about looking back. It's also about looking forward. See, the cross was not the end of Jesus. His burial in the tomb was not the end of Jesus. And it was not the end for him. I want to tell you today, the cross is not the end for us. Some people come to the cross and they stay there. They get stuck at the cross. Don't seem to move on and move forward. But this is about not just looking back, it's looking forward and about moving forward. The cross was not the end of Jesus, and the cross does not represent the end for us. It's not the stop-off point. There's life beyond the cross. The cross is where salvation begins. The cross is where we receive forgiveness, but it's not where we end things. Some people's testimony is, "This is what I was, then I came to Jesus Christ, I got forgiveness, and thank God I'm saved," and that's it. But it's not where we stop. There's life beyond the cross, and we need to enter into that life by embracing it. We can talk about the promises of God, but those promises will not be fulfilled unless you embrace those promises. The biggest mistake that the people of Israel made when they came out of Egypt was to fail to enter into the promises. They failed to enter into every promise that God had made for them. They failed to enter into the plans and the purposes of God. They came out of Egypt. They left Egypt behind, but they failed to enter in to the promises and the plans and the purposes of God. Egypt represents the world. It represents slavery to sin. As Christians, we have come out of Egypt. We've come out of the world. We've come out of slavery to the world. But is that all we've done? Is that all we've done, or have we truly entered into all that God has purposed and planned for us? They crossed over the Red Sea. Red Sea representing the blood of Christ, even there in the Old Testament. Taking them out of their slavery into a different situation. But instead of entering the promised land, because they could have got there in weeks, they could have went through that wilderness in a few weeks. They could have got the River Jordan and went straight into Israel, or into Canaan at that time. But it took them 40 years. 40 years of wandering, going around in circles, doing nothing, nothing ever happening except fights and battles. Only 2 people who come out of Egypt entered the promised land. Only 2 people. Some say there were up to 3 million that left Egypt as slaves. There was a nation of the descendants of Abraham in Egypt at that time. But only 2 who left Egypt made it to the promised land. That was Joshua and Caleb. They entered along with everyone that had been born in the wilderness. But all the others who came out, even Moses, he died and never got to the promised land. Moses saw it, but he never got there. And that was a whole different situation. We'll not go into that. Just a moment, we're going to be joining for communion here. But they finally crossed the Jordan, and they finally entered in. But when they entered into the promised land, they still had to take the land. And again, not going through the details, but they took the land. And friends, what I'm saying to you this morning is, don't do what they did. Don't stop short. Don't cut yourself off from what God has purposed and planned for you. There's life beyond Egypt. There was life beyond the Red Sea. There was life beyond Jordan. They just had to go and get it and take it and embrace it. And so I'm saying this morning, there's life beyond the cross. Don't be content with just coming out of Egypt. Don't be content with just coming out of the world. Don't be just content with thinking, okay, my sins are forgiven. My name's written down in the Lamb's Book of Life. But enter in. Let this be the year that you will truly enter in, and you'll take hold of the promises of God and embrace His plans and embrace His purpose. So when you're taking these emblems, don't just look back, but look forward and move forward. This is not just so that we can have a little time, a few moments in a Sunday morning service. This has enabled us to reflect, but also to say, God, we're not stopping here. We're moving forward. We're moving on. We're going to embrace what you have promised, planned, and purposed for us. We're going to embrace it. We're going to enter into it. This is going to be our year. You've heard people, I'm going to ask those who have served as the emblems, please, to come forward. You've heard people in recent times share what God's been doing in their lives. People stand up and pray. People share things. Sunday nights, Tuesday nights, it happens all the time. Time to time it happens here on a Sunday morning. But I want to say to you this morning, this is not your year just to listen to what God is doing in other people's lives. This is your year. This is your year. This is your year for you to open your mouth, to open your voice, to take a step forward, for you to say, God, I'm not just interested, it's great what you're doing in other people's lives, but you're going to do it in my life, you're going to do it in my family's life. And we want to see you do it in this church. Do you know how God does it in the church? When He works through you as individuals, because we are the church. We are the body of Christ. So when you enter in, the church enters in. Don't rob the church by not entering in. You take hold of what God has for you. Don't just look back. Look forward and move forward. Let's just take a moment and reflect and pray.